Bashing the press is a time-honored political strategy, especially among Republicans. But this week, CNBC's debate generated unprecedented anti-media vitriol from both candidates and viewers. And in response today, the RNC chair suspended the February debate with NBC News. Adam has more.
Live from the University of Colorado in Boulder.
When the Republicans gathered in Colorado Wednesday, moderator Carlos Quintanilla kicked things off with a question straight out of a boring job interview.
What is your biggest weakness, and what are you doing to address it?
Then John Harwood got combative with Donald Trump, and the pushback began.
Is this a comic book version of a presidential campaign?
It's not a comic book, and it's not a very nicely asked question.
The awkward questions kept on coming, including this doozy to Marco Rubio.
When they say you act like you hate your job, do you?
Eventually, Ted Cruz had had enough.
This is not a cage match. And you look at the questions. Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult two people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen? How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
Cruz also accused the media of going easier on Democrats than Republicans. And Rubio went even further.
The Democrats have the ultimate super PAC. It's called the mainstream media, who every single day.
For their part, CNBC's questioners looked overmatched.
Where did I read this and come up with this that you were...
Probably, I don't know, you people write this stuff.
And for the record, it wasn't just the candidates who thought CNBC tanked.
Did you guys watch the debate on CNBC last night? Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Clearly, he's not the only one.
This is tough because now the RNC is taking it out on the mothership, NBC, and that's right in the middle of the New Hampshire primary. NBC was supposed to have an important Republican presidential candidate primary debate. They're pulling the rug out from under them. But I think there's a lot of toe curling going on at CNBC and certainly at the network level. I'd love to be a fly on the wall to hear what NBC executives are saying to the CNBC people, like, how could you let this happen? I mean, people are saying they were not only they were unprepared, but I thought the questions were juvenile. What kind of a flower would you like to be? It was just awful, and they weren't prepared. They couldn't come back with any kind of sophisticated follow up. I have to say, I thought the other 2 or 3 debates, lost track at this point, were excellent by comparison.
This was terrible. I wrote about this for WGBHnews.org. Since Spiro Agnew, Republicans have loved to claim that the liberal media are out to get them. And every so often, we come through and give them all the ammunition they could possibly want. In this case, it wasn't that the questions had a particular liberal twist to them. It's that every single question had this sneering, disrespectful tone. What kind of a question do you end with by saying, what did he say? Is this a comic book candidacy? I've actually seen people trying to defend CNBC saying that Ted Cruz was not accurately quoting the transcript. Well, he's following this contemporaneously. I think he paraphrased it very accurately. Yeah. He may have a career as a media critic if for some strange reason he doesn't make it to the White House.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we all know in the media is that you don't put your head in the lion's mouth. And I think that's what CNBC did by just sheer kind of ignorance in this case. It's very strange because it feels like to some extent they were trying to make the debate more entertaining or lively, and that seems like it's a really bad thing to try to manufacture. That's not necessary. That's inviting more harm, In this case, your simple job is to ask people that are supposed to be running for the highest office in our country, if they are qualified for the job. It's not a normal job interview. You're not asking them, what's your favorite color, or, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And so, and the fact that one of the moderators just couldn't accurately say where they got information from. I mean, again, that's like an own goal. Like, what are you doing, CNBC? They should be worried. This is a self-inflicted wound.
And they stepped all over their own brand. I don't watch a lot of CNBC because I don't have a lot of money in the stock market. I wish, but and supposedly it's a place to turn for in-depth business and economic news and analysis, right? Well, you wouldn't know it from the quality of the questions. There were a few relevant questions about the deficit and unequal pay for women, but what about the bankruptcy of Puerto Rico? That's a pretty big story right now. Nothing about that. What about the economic situation of urban America, urban bankruptcies? What about income inequality? The list goes on and on. It was debate moderation for idiots, by idiots, or at least people acting like idiots. And I would just say this, I'm the last person on earth who would deny grotesque media bias sometimes rears up its head. But keep in mind, in the Democratic debate that CNN sponsored, essentially, Bernie Sanders pulled a Ted Cruz with his line about, I'm sick of hearing about your damn emails. Yeah. That was essentially a critique of the line of questioning by the CNN questioner, so it does work both ways. Yeah.
What I would say is that a lot of the questions would have been fine if they hadn't tagged on stuff at the end. Right. Just kept it straight. If you hadn't put comic book villain, if you hadn't asked some of the other, there were some other things that just didn't make sense. And also, you have to ask yourself, and John could answer this better as a debate moderator, I've done a few, much less tame, if the person is lying and you know they are lying and it's from something they've said, how do you respond other than saying, I thought you said that?
Oh, I know.
That you have to have something. But my favorite line of the night, which I believe was a better critique of the media than Ted Cruz, came from Chris Christie. When he started to answer a question and John Harwood interrupted him and he said, you know, John, even in New Jersey, that's rude. That is the best line of the night. And he was right. Yeah. Like, he said, can I answer the question? So it's, I don't know what happened here because these are smart people.
Yeah, I would just say this in response to your question. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. There are plenty of other good ways to do this. My personal approach is, within reason, let the viewer at home judge and whether or not a candidate is full of bull. Exactly. And let the other candidates call them on it. Let them do some work and show how alert they are. Yeah.